your forbearance on that. So,
Mayor, I'm sorry, what was the announcement?
so my recommendation, Commissioner Fish, we should, a lot of what is left, we have a number of items left over from this morning's agenda. I would recommend we dispose of those first. We have quite a few second readings that we can get rid of. You've got 2 items.
Second readings.
Okay, and then we have a couple of procurement reports. We have an appointment. We have a 4/5 agenda item. And then we have the afternoon session items. We have the parking management plan. We have a time certain at 2:45. I think we can read those 2 items together.
And so it looks like I have a early absence, so as long as we have all the emergency and second reading stuff done by, I think, 4, then I don't think I'll be inconveniencing the council.
Okay, very good. So we are back in session. This is the afternoon session of the Portland City Council. My memory serves me correctly. It is June 13th. This is the afternoon session. For those of you watching on TV, we are behind schedule today, and we're going to play a little bit of catch up here, and hopefully folks will be brief in their presentations and their remarks, but not too brief. Item 6.4.
Do the roll first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Call the roll, Carla, please.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Udaly.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. I'm going to skip the introductory comments.
I assume they were read this morning.
They were read this morning.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. And they were even enforced this morning. Item 6.40.
Amend the building demolition
robustly
code
in a while,
to
man.
simplify definitions, revise dust site control and demolition delay provisions, and make technical amendments.
Commissioner Udaly.
Thank you, Mayor. BDS staff recommended some changes to the building demolition code in January 2017. Since then, the council adopted an ordinance adding dust and site control requirements to the demolition code, which will be implemented by July 1st. This ordinance includes the changes BDS staff proposed, along with 2 amendments to the dust and site control requirements. The changes are: amend the definitions of demolition, major addition, and major alteration to be clearer and easier to apply, require dust suppression for major alterations that use mechanical equipment to demolish parts of the structure, clarify points related to existing residential demolition delay appeal hearings, expand the types of certifications BDS will allow for on-site asbestos personnel, remove the exception to the during demolition inspection for accessory structures, and make other minor technical changes to the demolition code. I would now like to introduce Nancy Thorington from BDS to give more information and answer any questions from council.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and council members. I hope you got some food. I can see you chewing. Good. Commissioner Udaly basically summed up what's in this ordinance. It's mainly a cleanup type of ordinance, changing the definitions of demolition, major alteration, major addition, based on the discussions that we had last year, make them cleaner and easier to apply. We also, as we've been implementing, or getting ready to implement the dust and site control measures, we found some things that would, we wanted to tweak a little bit. First was adding back in, making sure that the during demolition inspection is mandatory. We had carved out an exception for the, small ADUs kind of a thing. But as we got into the process, we realized that our inspections realized that we could use some existing programming and that we could do all of those inspections without exception. And also as we got into doing the administrative rules, it became clear that we were requiring somebody on site for the asbestos to oversee in case there's asbestos found. And we had limited it to an inspection. It's a very specific certification, and we discovered that there are a couple other certifications that can be used, and we also wanted, based on input from the community, to add another way of getting, instead of having to have somebody on site the whole time, actually doing what they call destructive asbestos testing as an alternative. So, and then some technical changes. So that's essentially it. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to.
Commissioner Fritz.
So I have a question about the definition of demolition to
Yes.
removing all exterior walls above the foundation. I know this has been a gnarly issue that we have struggled with over the years.
Yes.
What's to stop a developer from keeping a very small portion of the wall and calling it not a demolition?
That they can do right now. So,
Right, I
so
know.
that's not changing that piece. And so what we did to address that was to add in the requirement, because basically the issue, there are two issues if you divide it. There's the hazardous issues, you know, the asbestos, the dust control. So to address that issue, anytime in a major alteration, which that would qualify as a major alteration, they have to use the dust control measures. So that gets at the dust control. What it doesn't get at is sort of the character of the neighborhood. But in discussions with the mayor's office and the commissioner's office and our director, we want to take a look at that piece separately, because it's not really a fire life safety issue. It's more of a character of the neighborhood. So if, that may be something that we want to look at more comprehensively in, say, the residential infill project, rather than trying to tie it to the, sort of building code, fire safety issues.
Okay, and is that currently happening in the residential infill project?
To my knowledge, it is, but we will definitely be following up to, if it's not, then we'll look at another way to address it.
Yeah, I would like to put this one to bed once and
Understood.
for all. Thank you.
Yes, sure.
Very good. Commissioner Fish, did you have a question?
No, thank you.
Public testimony?
Two people had signed up, Perry Cabot and Terry Parker.
I see Mr. Parker. Thank you, sir, for your patience, as always.
Thank you. I wasn't here the full time. In fact, I wasn't going to testify on this until I saw it out there, but my comments are really brief. Currently, there's a lack of oversight. Developers are having contractors file for demolition permits before filing for ownership of the property. And that creates a problem for people trying to save a house or a structure in their neighborhood. So the oversight needs to be approved, and it makes me a little bit nervous about the oversight for the new program. Because they also just check the box for hazardous material without actually having an on-site inspection for the permit. Finally, the other thing I was going to say is that deconstruction is probably better than demolition, and it would be better if we could extend the deconstruction to beyond 1917 homes as far as possible. And I'll end my comments there. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Thank you for being here, Nancy. Aye.
Fritz.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy Thorrington, for your ongoing great work. Aye.
Wheeler.
I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Next item, 641, a second reading.
Accept a $188,000 award from Metro Nature and Neighborhoods Capital Grants Program for improvements at Leach Botanical Garden.
Colleagues, as with all second readings, this one has already been read into the record. There's been a presentation. We've taken public testimony. Is there any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Well, thanks to Metro for supporting our, what is known affectionately in East Portland as the hidden little gem of that community. And Leach is just a fantastic amenity in our city, and this combined with the investment that Commissioner Fritz has overseen and their own fundraising means that they're one step closer to realizing their great vision. Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Thanks, Commissioner Fish, for your ongoing partnership and support of this great project. Aye.
Wheeler.
Excellent work. Thank you. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, let's get rid of some of these second readings. Could you please read item number 644?
644, authorize contract with CDM Smith, Inc. to provide engineering services for the Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant headwork screening improvements project.
Call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 645, second reading.
645, accept a grant in the amount of $162,635 from the State of Oregon, Oregon Military Department, Office of Emergency Management for FY 2017 State Homeland Security Grant Program Phase 7 to fund Joint Bomb Teams equipment and training.
Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 646, a second reading.
Authorize an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Portland, City of Gresham, City of Vancouver, Clackamas County, Port of Portland, and Clark County, Washington, to maintain and equip a unit capable of an immediate response to situations involving explosives and explosive disposal.
Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 650, second reading.
650, amend the business license law to increase the tax rate and increase the owner's compensation deduction.
Please call the roll.
Fish.
I'm very pleased that the council is fulfilling a commitment that three of us made many years ago to bump the business owner's compensation deduction to $125,000, which is great news for our smaller neighborhood small businesses. And I'm grateful that we have this additional revenue source that was in turn able to allow us to reach consensus on a new budget. Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
So in 2008, when I was elected to council, I publicly supported increasing the owner's compensation deduction to $125,000. I have consistently supported this increase, but over the last decade, we've only been able to make incremental increases to $90,500 in 2012 and to $100,000 in 2013. Most of those years have been cut budgets, and it was not feasible to increase the deduction at the same time as we were making painful cuts. This year, with the increase in the business license fee, we are finally able to increase the deduction to $125,000. As I mentioned in my vote to approve the budget, I am also interested in increasing the gross receipts exemption from the current $50,000 to $100,000. Hopefully, it won't take another 10 years to accomplish this change, which will benefit the smallest of small businesses in Portland. Thanks to Mayor Wheeler for your leadership on this, to Andrew Scott in the City Budget Office, and Tim Crail. Aye.
Wheeler.
Looks good. I vote aye. Ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Next, we'll do emergency ordinances because we're going to lose Commissioner Fish at some point. 649, please.
649, authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder and provide for payment for the City Hall exterior restoration project.
Oh, good. Good afternoon.
Good
Let me see
afternoon,
if I
Mayor.
have,
Good
I don't
afternoon,
remember if
Commissioners.
I had talking points on this. I don't. Sorry. Good. Go.
What we have today is authorization for a competitive bid for construction for the City Hall restoration project. I met with staff in the last few weeks, so should be briefed on it, as well as Commissioner Fritz. Thank you for your time, Commissioner Fritz. This project is cleaning and restoration of the exterior facade, as well as repair to windows and doors. We will be doing a roof replacement. The roof is at the end of life. We will also be including a new eco roof where we can, where the weight can be supported on the roof, as well as replacement of rooftop mechanical equipment. My intention is for this bid to go out in the fall to gain support for spring construction timeline. The engineer's estimate for the project is $3,833,899. Any questions?
Commissioner Fritz.
Am I correct in remembering that this will bring the City Hall building up to seismic standards?
This is not a seismic project. That project was done previously. I think that was done in 1997.
But the parapet now will be not falling off.
We will be seismically bracing, yes, we'll be pinning the balusters on the roof. Yes, you are correct.
Check we're done on City Hall?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good
I have a question.
Commissioner Fish.
I walked the perimeter of the building the other day, and I'm delighted to hear we're going to do a thorough washing of the exterior because there's grime buildups and other things
Indeed.
over time. We're also, in some of the decorative pieces and some of the plaster is falling,
Yes.
is damaged. Does this amount of money fund the repair and restoration of those elements as well?
Yes, it does. We did some tests on cleaning the building as well as retooling the facade back to the subsurface to get rid of the shaling. It's taken a beating over the last few winters.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank
It's
you.
ready for it.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up?
Great. Well, let's call the roll then.
Fish.
I feel very lucky to work in this building. It's a magnificent structure, a historic building, and when you're finished with this project, it'll even look better. So thank you. Aye.
Salzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you for the briefing and for all your work on this. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. I'm actually very excited about that one. Thank you. Next item.
Thank you.
642. Thanks for your good work on that. We look forward to updates. 642, please.
642, vacate a portion of Southwest Falcon Street east of Southwest Barber Boulevard, subject to certain conditions and reservations.
Commissioner Salz.
Carl, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. This ordinance is a street vacation for a small piece of Southwest Falcon Street, adjacent to Barber Boulevard in Southwest Portland. The street vacation was initiated by one of the adjacent property owners, Mr. Gary Fallu, who is here today. He and his family own several parcels of land adjacent to Falcon Street and Barber Boulevard. They are planning to redevelop their properties, and the street vacation of the small piece of Falcon would help facilitate their redevelopment plans. We sent out notices to the required bureaus and agencies. We did not receive any comments opposing the street vacation. PBOT and TriMet and ODOT all asked, and the petitioners agreed, to slightly reduce the area being vacated to allow for the possibility of a Southwest Corridor mass transit project that's TriMet has been working on along Barber Boulevard. Back in October of last year, we received an email from the Hillsdale Neighborhood Association expressing support for the project's overall direction. The Planning Sustainability Commission reviewed and recommended approval of the proposal back in January 9th of this year. One of the conditions is that the Bureau of Environmental Services has asked for an easement over the entire vacation area for stormwater drainage purposes. Comcast and PGE both asked for easements in the ordinance to protect their lines in the area, and those are in the ordinance. And finally, PBOT has asked for a right-of-way dedication next to the vacation area to allow space for a vehicle turnaround for what's left of Falcon Street. And we can show that on my slide here. So this is a view from 17th Avenue. This is Falcon Street. The vacation area is basically in the wooded area leading up here, going up the hill towards Barber Boulevard. Barber Boulevard goes across this way, running southwest. And so the paved portion will remain paved. The new turnaround that PBOT is asking for will go over here on the left side, the south side of Falcon Street eventually as part of development. This is another map of this green area is the vacation area. This shows the new dedication for the turnaround. This blue area is showing the overall area that the petitioners worked with TriMet to make sure that there'll be enough space left as part of their project for the potential of the Southwest high-speed transit line that TriMet is working on. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. The petitioner is also here, and he has, I think, maybe some comments and slides also.
Very good, Commissioner. Commissioner Fritz, did you have a question?
In addition to the space for the light rail line, is there going to be enough room for a sidewalk?
Yes, I believe that when PBOT and TriMet and ODOT were consulting with us and the petitioner, the extra right-of-way that's being left includes all of those features for the road and TriMet and sidewalks and bike lane, I believe.
Very good. And if the petitioner wanted to make some brief comments, this would probably be a good time to do it. Come on up. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your patience. I know you were here this morning.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you.
You certainly got a flavor of how council operates.
It was educational how public and private come together to make things work. I mean, I learned a lot.
Okay. So, and I believe there's some slides that the petitioner's architect sent over that Sue can help me load up, maybe.
Just to give you my background, my name is Gary Fallow. I'm the petitioner. My family and I have owned the Golden Touch since 1982. My mom owns it. Then we've added more land around it. I've added land. My brother's added land. We have 4 parcels there. And the Falcon Street, as Carl pointed out, and I want to thank Carl and Dee. They've been amazing to work with over the past 4 years. We started this when, really, we started this when the Barber Concept Plan came into effect in 2013 in April. And I looked at the concept plan, and my brother Bill, who's here, pointed out that our corner there, 19th and Barber, was what they planned was a multifamily building. So we took that and we grew it to this concept. So if Carl can go through these slides. If you look at the first slide, the blue area is what we worked with the city since 2014 to do the sidewalk and the bicycle paths. There's about 6 miles on Barber that has no bicycle path. We will do that in front of our frontage, and that's the goal of this, and the sidewalk. Then we got great hints from TriMet when we started this that light rail is going to run from OHSU to Bridgeport. So they wanted us to design this to fit the future planning of the city. So if you look at the pink, that's where the platform, if the 2020 bond passes, is going to lie for the light rail as it travels down Barber and towards Bridgeport. However, we also have, if it doesn't happen, we also have given land in front of our building and project for TriMet to have a bus stop there, which they requested. So we planned for 2021 and 2026, depending if light rail happens or if they choose to go down a different path, we'll still have a TriMet stop in front. There'll be 5 buildings there. As you see the yellow area that Carl's pointing to, that's the area of the partial street vacation. That's an important area for us. That's where building C, and we'll go to building C will be, and that will be partitioned amongst 3 properties that we own.
So just as a clarification before you move off that then, so the environmental services easement isn't over the whole part of the property?
For immediately following the street vacation, BES's easement will be over the entire street vacation area. As part of their development, they're planning to put in a new storm drain pipe through the street vacation area. And at that time, we've talked to BES about that the easement would be replaced with a new, smaller easement.
I see. Thank you.
Could you, with that slide up, can you just, for those of us who don't live close to this block, Building A is now a grocery store?
Building A is a restaurant.
Is a restaurant, excuse me.
It's the Golden Touch.
Okay.
Yes.
And what else is on this site?
The other building, so if you go down towards, I guess go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the next slide is good. So
I see.
okay, so this is what it's going to be developed into. So you see across the street, there's the Safeway that was built in 2014.
Safeway's over here.
I see.
It's up in the top corner. So building A is where the Golden Touch
This is where the
is.
restaurant is.
Right. And then Building C, the long, broad building, if you look at the base of it, that is where the Falcon Street partial vacation will occur. Then Building D is an apartment building which is held by an LLC that I own, 16 apartments. And Building E is commercial property, 3 buildings that we own. No one's occupying the buildings in Building E.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
You're welcome.
So this will be commercial and residential?
Exactly, it'll be commercial. If we go to the next slides, we can run through that. So as you can see, the next slide is the overview with how close this is to I-5 and Barber Boulevard. We had to work very closely with ODOT and PBOT because ODOT runs Barber and it runs the highway, and then PBOT runs the streets by it, plus BES with the stormwater pipe, and TriMet, which wants to run light rail. So we kind of brought, since 2014, we kind of brought what the public entities wanted with what our private land holdings. So we designed this to fit the neighborhood. So we'll have I-5, which this is the section of I-5 between Terwilliger and the Multnomah exit. So if you're going down south towards Salem, this is the first kind of exit off there. And as you can see, the Falcon Street vacation will occur between buildings E and D, but that will remain city property. We will just do the Falcon Street vacated up towards Barber underneath Building C.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
And then if you go to the next slide, our lead commercial is going to be Natural Grocers. They will take the corner of Barber and 19th. They've signed a lease for 15,000 square feet. We have 20,000 square more feet in the development that we have not leased yet.
With parking underneath?
Pardon me?
The parking is underneath?
401 stalls underneath. So it will be the entrance of the parking. There'll be 3 different entrance sites, one off Barber, very close to where the vacation will be, then one off Multnomah, and then another through the Falcon Street. We designed this so we can have both commercial and the housing units. So we'll have, if you go to the next street view, this is the street view from Barber and 17th as we're looking towards Tigard, towards southwest. So that's what it will look like. You see the sidewalk and then the bike path. And then if light rail comes through, it'll be right in front of the platform, will be right in the middle, and we've made room for that.
My eyes aren't good enough to pick up your architects. Who's MA?
Well, it's a long story, but so we grew up in Portland, but my very close friend, who also grew up in Portland, now lives in Prague, Mark Vidra. And Mark and I have brought this together and designed this with an architect from Prague, who's an American, but we wanted to give it kind of a European feel.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Exactly. We wanted to make
it has a European.
Exactly. Well, I'm Greek. I was born in Greece, and my family's Greek, and we grew up in the restaurant. So we decided to do a little European feel because we're going to put a plaza there in the middle. And the reason we're doing the plaza is because we're trying to figure out what will fit for 2021 and then 2026 when light rail goes through. We're assuming light rail will go through. Regardless if it goes through or not, I think this is the centerpiece of the Southwest Corridor.
That's great.
This is a great community, and that's why we designed it this way.
And is that as tall as you're allowed to go?
Yes, as tall as we were allowed to go. We went back and forth, and this is as tall as we were allowed to go.
And are you using inclusionary housing?
We don't have to.
So you're building to the code?
We're building to the code, yep.
It's great. It's living in that neighborhood. It's really dramatic improvement.
Thank you. And I
Being a
just
frequent
want
patron of the Golden Touch as well.
exactly. Well, I think my mom, as you know, you probably know her.
Yes. Yes.
Does Dan get free discounted food at this restaurant? That's what I want
Yes,
to know.
exactly. So, yeah, so that's the goal, and that's why it's important for the partial street vacation. And so if you go to the last, the project info, the residential is going to be 276,000 square feet, the commercial 35,000 square feet, the parking is 173,000 square feet, the total project size is 485,000 square feet. It's about 1.85 acres that we will build on. And the residential units are 281 units, and parking stalls 404 underground.
Is there parking for the residential units?
And the commercial, both.
So that
Per code.
404 is for both?
It's total, yeah.
Very good. Is there any public testimony on this item?
We had two other people sign up. I believe it's Bill Garifallo and Dave Mingus.
Very good. Thank you, John.
I'm piggybacking on my brother, so he basically said everything that we were hoping to say.
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, my name is Bill Garifallo. I'm Gary's brother.
Thank you.
I'm one of the partial owners of one of the areas that's going to be added to the development. This project, the concept, has been seen from as far back as 1999 when they had the Barber Streetscape plan, where all the city officials and the neighborhoods came together and thought of creating a kind of a interaction between public transit and the local community. It proceeded on to the Southwest Corridor in 2013. I was a member of that as well, making sure that the local communities, Multnomah and Hillsdale neighborhoods, looked at this mixed use as a great opportunity to put public and private work and input along with a transit system that is publicly subsidized. So this has been a kind of a dream of our family going back quite a while. And the vacation is essentially a location that's a cliff, 60-degree grade, and it will enable what is now, there's 16 units of apartment complexes in this thing, and it'll go up to over 200 with an additional 20,000 commercial space. So as we're viewing this as a transit corridor for the future in 2025, with the light rail possibly going through, or rapid transit systems with rapid higher frequency of buses going through, we are in line with what the community has envisioned, making sure we increase density again along public transit corridors, and not only using it as a transit corridor, but also as a commerce corridor.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really glad your family held on to the property, and that
Yes.
you're developing it as opposed to
And Mr. Stoltzman, I remember
somebody
my
else.
dad, because you used to come to our restaurant,
Right.
my dad would say, this politician supports businesses. I remember you always would say that to us. So I remember you when I was a smaller kid growing up in that area.
I'm glad it's still in your family.
Thank you. Does that complete public testimony?
If Mr. Mingus is not present,
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Dave Mingus. I'm the Senior Construction Manager for Comcast in Oregon and Southwest Washington, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Comcast on the request to vacate a portion of this easement. As it currently stands, we are opposed to vacating any of our easement or any of the rights associated with it. We have not seen everything with this proposal. I think there's more discovery that needs to happen. We have a major hub in this area, a transport hub, and we have facilities that run through there that impact quite a bit of Portland.
So we heard that your easement is going to be honored. Is that not the case?
We're opposing any vacation of any easement if we're required to vacate any of our easement or any rights that are associated with it.
But if you're not, then you're okay with it?
We are not okay with it at this point.
So yeah, so the ordinance language will include an easement for Comcast's favor, they have several conduits in the vacation area. And so the ordinance would put an easement in Comcast's favor to protect those conduits so that any development that the petitioners were going to do would have to happen outside of those easements, or they would have to work with Comcast to modify those easements.
So could I get clarification, and what is the basis of the opposition, given that caveat?
We don't know the impact on that easement in our facilities, and it's a major transport hub for the city of Portland. I can't talk about the specifics of what that transports, but it has significant implications to the city of Portland and our services going into Portland.
So let me read you what it says in the ordinance, and then you can perhaps explain why you're concerned.
Okay.
In accordance with ORS 271.120 and city policy, this ordinance shall not cause or require the removal or abandonment of any sewer, water, or gas main, conduit of any kind, wire, pole, or thing used or intended to be used for any public service, included but not limited to those identified by Comcast and PGE. Subject to paragraph B7, this ordinance will reserve an easement for the owner of such utility or thing to maintain, continue, repair, reconstruct, renew, replace, rebuild, and or enlarge any and all such things. No building or structure of any kind shall be built or erected within 10 feet of the center line of such easement. And it goes on.
Yeah, I think some of our concerns is this being a major hub facility is parking for our vehicles to access that facility and maintain that facility. We just are asking for some further discovery and discussions with the developers to make sure that nothing's going to be impacted.
Sir.
And that we're not going to be giving up any rights in that easement.
Sir, we are often accused of elevating process over substance. This petition to vacate the street was filed in February of 2015. It's now 3.5 years later. Can you explain to us why Comcast hasn't been able to resolve this issue in the intervening 3.5 years?
I cannot, sir. This is the first I've heard of this proposal, and I've been in the construction department for the last 2 years.
You're saying that the Comcast didn't get notice of this because that's under?
I can tell you that as the senior manager of construction, I am not aware of this proposal in the last 2 years that I've been in the construction department at Comcast.
So if we're talking about an easement that affects Comcast, I assume we've given notice?
Yeah, we sent notice, I believe, because the project changed, we sent notice to Comcast and other utilities on 2 different occasions, and we received responses from Comcast on 2 different occasions, asking for the easement for their conduits. And so most recently, I was speaking with, or trading emails and phone calls with 2 other Comcast folks locally, I think Kevin Arnold and Paul Stellmarker.
And as long as there's no issue, as long as the provision provides us the easement that we need, and we're not going to have to move facilities, and it doesn't take away any rights, we're not opposed to that.
May I just fill you in?
Yeah,
We've
sure.
been working with Comcast since 2015. We've met with Steve Daring, Paul Stellmarker, Scott Livingstone. We've had multiple meetings with them. Mr. Mingus has never been in any of those meetings, has never shown up, or has never contradicted anything we've ever put out. This is the first time we've ever seen Mr. Mingus. We have negotiated with him, and the plan is that we're going to follow the street vacation as Carl has set up. Mr. Mingus chose to show up today. We've had multiple meetings at the Tigard facility with multiple people. Paul Stellmarker, Steve Daring, and Scott Livingstone, we've run this by them. They've actually proposed at our last meeting that they will take their fiber off of the Falcon Street because it will make it easier for them to run it down Multnomah and run it down Barber eventually. So we've had these talks.
That's a true statement. That's a forced
Right, so
relocate for us.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So they've consented to this. We would not be here if they did not consent to this.
Mayor, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah, I met with Mr. Stellmarker this morning, and he had concerns about the easement, that the facilities were going to be protected, and that was our only concern. is that we have protection of that easement and that we're not giving up any rights in that easement in this, and that's all,
My
we
read
want.
of the ordinance is you're well protected.
Then we are fine with it at that point, as long as we have those
The mayor,
protections.
the mayor,
I'm not a lawyer, though.
the mayor
I'm not
admonished us at
giving legal
about
advice.
2 o'clock to try to keep these matters brief because we're backed up. This is a first reading of an ordinance. May I just suggest to our friends at Comcast that if based on the representations that you've heard today
Yes.
and the documents that have filed, if you continue to have an objection, would you please have a letter to the PBOT commissioner and to the mayor by no later than Monday?
Absolutely.
Stating explicitly the basis of your objection. And if that's not received, I think the council will assume that you no longer have an objection because we will be voting on this next Wednesday.
Fair enough.
That's okay
Very
with
good.
my colleagues.
Anything else, colleagues? Any further questions? Commissioner Fritz?
I'd actually like to amend that, so send it to all 5 of us and just tell us you are opposed or you're not opposed.
Yeah, from what I'm hearing now, I'm not opposed to it. We have the protections that we need. We're not giving up any rights of the easement, and we're good to move forward.
Thank you.
Very good. So this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next up, I'm sorry I'm jumping around. I'm just mindful of my quorum. So we have a 4/5 agenda, which requires 4 of us to be here. Is that correct?
Mayor, it requires anybody who was who put the matter on the agenda to be here, and then at least 4 people to be here, 3 majority votes to pass.
So yes, we need to do it now.
Okay, let's do it. 6511, please. 4/5 agenda.
Encourage the Supreme Court to consider our country's proud legacy of working people organizing together for fairness and justice in rendering its decision in the pending Janus v. AFSCME case because it will have a monumental impact on city residents.
Commissioner Udaley.
Thank you, Mayor. This resolution is about reaffirming the importance of preserving the freedom of working people to unionize. As early as this Monday, we're expecting a decision from the Supreme Court on the Janus v. AFSCME case, which will have important implications for the ability of unions to negotiate on behalf of all workers. I would like to turn this over to my Chief of Staff, Marshall Runkle, who will say a few more words about this.
Come on up.
Thank you, Commissioner and Council. I am going to not read everything on this whole page, just to try to move things along. I would say that this resolution was developed in consultation with national groups and our local unions. The Commissioner and I had a luncheon meeting with one of local union at BDS. And when we asked them about this issue, to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 about how important it is, they said it was a 10 out of 10. And I think regardless of how the court rules, either next Monday or the following Monday, there's going to be significant implications for the city. So affirming our support for city workers is an important step, and that's what we're doing today, or that's what this resolution would do.
Very good. Thank you. Is there public testimony on this item?
I believe he left, Shedrick Wilkins.
Yes, I do not see him. Colleagues.
We do have the distinguished president of AFSCME Local here. Rob is never
Rob,
lost for words.
would you like to come on up and say a few words?
If you'd like to encourage us to pass it or not, Rob?
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Rob Martineau, AFSCME Local 189. I represent about 1,000 employees in the city of Portland, and I absolutely would encourage the passage of this. The city has a lot of responsibilities, and foremost delivering services to the city of Portland. And I do never like to view our relationship as combative. I view us as a partner to help the city be the great employer and protect the people that deliver the critical services the city needs. And although this could be very bad for people's right to organize and stand together, we believe that we will be stronger together and through partnership. So I look forward to continued collaboration and would encourage a yes on this amendment or the resolution.
We appreciate that very much. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Commissioner Udaley, thank you for bringing this forward. I'm reminded that if this is decided on a 5-4 basis, it will be decided on the basis of Neil Gorsuch votes, which after all was the appointment that by all rights was Barack Obama's to make. And had Obama made that appointment, this case could have had a different outcome. We're talking about a federal decision that will establish in the public sector so-called right to work nationally and would have the effect of essentially obliterating the fair share requirements that currently are the law, which allows someone to pay a fee to offset the cost of administering a contract if they choose not to be active members in a labor organization. This will have significant consequences, and it also significantly erodes and reverses decades of precedent. So much for stare decisis. I'm proud to vote aye, and I thank again my colleague for bringing this forward. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaley?
Well, I would like to note that we're joining at least 16 other cities across the country who are making similar resolutions. It doesn't make sense that people are more productive than ever, but are working longer hours for less benefits, less money and fewer benefits. It doesn't make sense that people are finding it more and more difficult to get by and provide for their families, no matter how hard they work. And it certainly doesn't make sense that 13 million Americans may have their health care taken away in order to give a handful of CEOs and other wealthy individuals trillions of dollars in tax cuts. Corporate CEOs and corporate interests have rigged our economy against working people. When the freedom to join together in strong unions is secure, other freedoms will be too, like the freedom to attend a parent-teacher conference or to take off work when a loved one is sick without fear of losing jobs or pay, or the freedom to choose where to live because quality public schools are available to all communities, not just those who are wealthy, or the freedom to retire with dignity. Through the strength of unions, working people are winning better pay, benefits, and protections that raise the standard of living for everyone. Educators negotiate to keep class sizes down so children have one-on-one attention and modern tools to learn. Nurses, firefighters, 911 dispatchers, and EMS workers fight for staffing levels, equipment, and training that save lives. Unions use their collective voice to advocate for policies that benefit all working people, like increases to the minimum wage, affordable health care, and great public schools. That's why the CEOs and billionaires who've spent their money and influence buying politicians and rigging our economy will stop at nothing to take away these hard-won freedoms. The Economic Policy Institute recently noted that if the court rules for Janus, it will likely have the most significant impact on workers' freedom to organize and bargain collectively in 70 years. This is why I'm proud to bring forth this resolution today that reaffirms Portland's commitment to preserving the freedom of working people to unionize. I vote aye.
Fritz.
Thank you, Commissioner Udaley, for bringing this forward. And some people will say it's symbolic. Yes, there's a lot of things that we need to do now because they're symbolic. I'm proud to be a union family. I'm still a member, dues-paying member of the Oregon Nurses Association, and my husband was president of the AFSCME local at the Oregon State Hospital. My son is now a proud member of the Teachers Union in Beaverton. Where unions are strong, all workers make more money. And we used to call them freeloaders at OHSU, the people who wanted to not pay into the union because the union negotiates for everybody, and everybody's wages are set by whatever is negotiated. Even here in the city, a lot of the non-represented workers are pay and benefits matches what the unions have won. And so it's important that everybody pays their fair share, no freeloaders. One of the nurses I worked with at OHSU when we went on strike was a single mom and felt she had to cross the picket line, so she went to work. And 3 years after the strike, she came to me because I was the union rep at the time, and she said, I want to join the union. I've realized that there's other protections that the union gives to me in terms of job security and fairness and grievances and all the things that we tend to take for granted, but which have been hard won by union members and by union leaders in particular. So we will find ways to make sure that working people are still honored in Portland. And it's just discouraging to feel that we're going backwards on so many different levels. And again, thank you for bringing this. Aye.
Wheeler.
Commissioner Udaley, thank you for bringing this to the council and making it a matter of urgency. I am very proud that the Portland City Council will stand with other city councils and other governments around the United States. We are standing on an important principle, and it is critically important that we be public about this and support the right to organize, and we are once again reaffirming that commitment to the value here, and we are standing with the employees of this municipal government because we support them in their right to organize. So I vote aye, the resolution is adopted. Thank you. Next item, 647. And we've got two construction projects. One is sewer and one is park. So let's start with 647.
Accept bid of Landis and Landis Construction, LLC, for the Montevilla North Sewer Rehabilitation Project for $7,537,078.
So these are all important projects. Before I turn this over, I just want to again be mindful of the time. And I don't want to squeeze you. These are excellent and important projects, but I just want us to be mindful. Commissioner Fish.
I think we can do this succinctly, Mayor. This ordinance will allow Environmental Services to begin construction on a project to repair or replace about 16,331 feet. That's over 3 miles of 100-year-old public sewer pipes in the Montevilla neighborhood, north of Stark Street, that are deteriorating due to age. The project will also install 15 new manholes, repair 72 manholes, and replace 221 public sewer connections to private properties. This investment in public infrastructure will ensure continued dependable sewer service, protect private property, public health, and our environment by reducing the possibility of sewage releases to homes, businesses, and streets. Larry Palat, City of Portland Procurement Manager, is here to give us a brief presentation. Larry?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I am Larry Palat, Procurement Services. She's not with me, at least not for this report. You have before you the procurement report. I am going to do a short version, I promise. It's a report recommending a contract award to Landis and Landis Construction to Montevilla North Sewer Rehab, $7,537,078. There were 3 bids for the project. Landis and Landis is low, but they are 21.65% over the engineer's estimate. I'll skip. There is a total of $2,045,000 or 27.13% of the project dollars available to the disadvantaged minority, women, and emerging small business subcontractor and supplier participation. Apportioned as follows: to disadvantaged minority and women-owned business, $1,585,000, which is just short of 75% of the total of the participation, and then $460,000 to emerging small business doing trucking and paving. Landis & Landis is located in Merrillhurst, Oregon. They are not a state-certified DMWESB contractor, but they are in compliance with all of the city's contracting requirements. If the council has any questions about the procurement, I can answer those. There are 2 representatives from BES here, but in the interest of time, I didn't ask them to come up, and we did not ask the vendor to be here because they significantly exceeded the aspirational goal.
Very good. Excellent. I'll entertain a motion unless anybody has any further questions. We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second motion from Commissioner Saltzman, a second from Commissioner Fish. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The report is adopted. Thank you again. Next up, 648.
Accept bid of Faison Construction, Inc. for the North Park Blocks Play Area Improvements Project for $1,111,387.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. I am going to take a few minutes to go over this project because it's spending taxpayers' money that was approved in the bond measure, and it's important for people to know that we're doing what we said we were going to do. As we all know, the Fix Our Park bond funding goes towards Park's most urgent need in 7 priority areas. Accepting this bid will allow us to begin construction on the North Park block area. This is the 5th replacement bond playground project to go into construction. Projects will have 21% disadvantaged minority, women, emerging small business participation, which supports Parks' spending investments on projects equitably. Project manager Robin Laughlin is here to give us an overview of the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. If I can get this to load. Okay, we're good. Let's skip over our first couple slides here since we've had such a perfect introduction. As Commissioner Fritz mentioned, this is the 5th playground in the Parks Bond to be replaced with those efforts. And this is at the North Park Blocks. I'm sorry. Oh, would you like to not see my notes? So the North Park Blocks are located in Northwest Portland and cover about 3 acres along North Park Block Avenue, stretching from Ankeny to Gleason. And these are some of the oldest parks in the city. We've owned them since 1869. This image shows the location of our project site where we're between Cooch and Davis, and we'll be focused on the playground area. The project replaces the 1993 playground and will provide much needed play for this neighborhood and will serve also the Emerson School's outdoor play spaces during the school day. Our total investment in this area of Portland is $1,598,656. As you may understand, the existing play structure is outdated. It has limited play opportunities and does not provide access for all. And the walkways leading to the playground have settled over time, creating tripping hazards for those with mobility issues. This project seeks to renovate the playground. Has had extensive input from the neighbors, from the Emerson School, from the Pacific Northwest College of the Arts, and many of the business owners in the neighborhood. And we've had, through those efforts, had really good positive collaboration with the community and looking forward to bringing these improvements to the neighborhood. Image before you here shows what the playground will be looking like, hopefully in another 3 or 4 months, meeting our goals of accessibility, safety, and inclusive collaborative play. Some of the new features we'll have here are swings and spinning elements. I won't get into all the details here since you're short on time, but we will be adding an additional 800 square feet of play within the fenced area. We will also be doing additional lighting at the playground and providing some accessibility improvements with curb cuts at 2 of the street corners. We anticipate starting construction in July and hope to be complete by later this fall, hopefully by October, November, depending on the weather. So if you have any other questions, I'll let Larry finish his statements.
I have a question of the commissioner in charge. The North Park Blocks obviously gets a lot of use and has been burdened by a lot of change in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And now we know with the decision to move forward with the post office site that the North Park Blocks at the place in front of PNCA is going to pivot and continue into the post office site. And that has potentially significant design ramifications, not only for the site in front of PNCA, but to the extension of the park blocks. Does the work on this particular project impact at all the larger vision of how to integrate the North Park Blocks with the post office site?
No, because it's closer to Burnside. It's between Cooch and Davis. So what you were talking about is down by Hoyt and Flanders. So I think that, if anything, it will draw people through. It'll be much more attractive than the current play structure. So it will tend to bring people from the South Park Blocks, O'Brien Square eventually when that's renovated, through this site, and then draw them into, hopefully, the post office site.
Well, just putting down a marker, my hope for the North Park Blocks is twofold. I hope at some point we organize a conservancy that engages the neighbors and the businesses to maintain it, because it's a heavily used area that, again, is in the middle of a vastly changing cultural district. And 2 is I hope we begin sooner rather than later the visioning process for what will be at the northern terminus, it used to be the terminus, and how that will herald the new park that goes into the post office site, because I think we have a unique opportunity to update the North Park Blocks.
So obviously Prosper Portland is leading that, but of course park staff are actively at the table, and I know that that's a concern shared by the Community Advisory Committee and the project leaders.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further comments? Anything else to add?
Just the actual procurement report itself is to award the contract to Faison Construction, Inc. At $1,111,387, which is unfortunately 13.4% over the engineer's estimate. There is a total of $239,446, or 21.54% of disadvantaged minority, women, and emerging small business subcontractor participation for the project. A portion as follows: disadvantaged business enterprises at $181,346, and an emerging small business at $58,100. Since Faison Construction met the city's aspirational goals for DMWESB subcontractor position, we did not ask them to be present for this presentation. However, since they are a certified firm, the total participation for disadvantaged minority and women-owned and emerging small business is just a bit short of 80%. If the council has any questions relative to that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Colleagues, any further questions?
Just like to add to what Mr. Palat just said, that the Parks did do a bid analysis to determine why it was over the engineer's estimate, and the answer is building contractors and construction materials are currently in high demand throughout the Pacific Northwest, and particularly in the Portland market. So it's a matter of shortage of labor and materials, which is why it's over the estimate.
Very good. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Fritz. Carla, please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you, Robin Laughlin, for all your work on all of the projects. I'm really proud of the work that we're doing together. Aye.
Wheeler.
Looks great. I vote aye. The report is accepted. Thank you both very much. Thank you, Commissioner. Next to last, 651.
Assess property for sidewalk repair for the Portland Bureau of Transportation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This will be very short. I am Sherry Matias from the Auditor's Office.
I'm Mike Zeller. I'm a sidewalk inspector with Sidewalk Safe Maintenance Operations.
Thank you.
And I'm Ryan Hoyt, sidewalk inspectors.
Thank you.
And this ordinance is for sidewalk repair on property that is required by the city. Any remonstrances have been removed, have been pulled from this assessment, and are not in this ordinance.
That was brief.
Well, that's like as brief as it gets. Very good. This technically is a hearing ordinance. Is there any public testimony on this item?
I showed two people had signed up, Kyle Bell and Kristen Lindquist.
Are Kyle or Kristen here? Very good. Very good. Come on up, sir. Three minutes. Name for the record, please.
Kyle Bell. I'm not sure which one is mine here. Thank you. Yeah, that's me. That's one. That's the one. Well, the picture came up. No, it wasn't. No, it was the other picture came up. It was that one. Okay. Thank you for having me here today. The reason that I'm here is to address our sidewalk removal and replacement in front of my house.
I apologize. We need your name for the record. Sorry.
Oh, Kyle Bell. Sorry, I thought I said it earlier. I have some images here that are on the screen right now. This is my first time with a PowerPoint, so it's not very exciting, and I will move this along. It's to help illustrate our concerns and discrepancies as to what was called out as a violation or a hazard, and why we feel our sidewalks were not necessarily a hazard, but rather we were included in what was a complaint, what we were told from the person that inspected our sidewalk, that it was likely a complaint further up the street. They go down the block and around the corner that included our property, and so we got kind of lassoed into this whole situation. And to be clear, with these with what I'm about to show, it's not an attack on anyone, but rather we're just trying to defend ourselves because we've been sort of saddled with this giant bill that we felt was completely unnecessary. So with that, this is a picture that I turned in last time I was here. I handed you a hard copy of it. It was our sidewalks minutes before they were torn up. Arguably, there are a lot of leaves, but they sort of blow down from the neighboring property, and it's a process to clean those up. But it's you can see where they're sort of marked up and ready to be cut. In my opinion, there are no tripping hazards or any dangers. It is simply a sidewalk. For the sort of uninitiated, this was something that was sent to me on what a tripping hazard is, or what a crack is, and what is something that is sort of a sidewalk that's sort of crumbling and falling apart. It's a 1/2 inch in every direction. I sort of built this out of a ruler. It's a 1/2 inch. Everyone knows what a 1/2 inch is, but when you actually kind of see it, it does create a different sense of like, this is what we're working with to be compliant with the city. My neighboring property is a retirement home that has numerous elderly people, and we thought maybe that was the reason we were originally turned in. So in the spirit of trying to figure out what would make us compliant or what is considered a hazard, we stepped to the property on the other side of the retirement home so that we're sort of the bookends of this retirement home. So on the other side is the Bureau of Parks Mount Tabor Yard. I don't know exactly what they do in there, but it's the city property. Sitting here in the foreground of the Bureau of Parks, that's a quarter, not a dime. I went back later and actually measured it. It's 1 inch. I sort of moved on from there. I was like, okay, this is, maybe it was an oversight. Somebody might not have noticed it, whatever. I did mention it in the last meeting in February, but I decided, all right, in the sort of spirit of just kind of figuring this all out and wanting to better understand it, I continued measuring. This was their driveway. I threw the whole measuring stick in the giant crack of their driveway. From there, I made it down to City Hall because I wanted to just see if that was compliant. And I started finding a lot of similar problems that I think would fall within this tiny 1/2 inch thing that this is our measuring bit. I do agree I'm a fan of historic buildings, and I do agree with the fixing up of the building. There are many violations around this entire building that we're sitting in. It's pretty easy to go around. You don't need to be an expert to go around with 1/2 inch and measure stuff. This is cracks right at the front door. This is where they just kind of paved the curb, because I was told I had curb issues too, and here it was just a regular old blacktop. There's a giant chunk missing because I had some of those, that's a curb violation or whatever, at a bus stop too. From here, it was, I wanted to find out, I have this $5,600 bill, and I was like, okay, how much are the permits? Like, what portion of this are the permits? So I went to
the $5,600 bill assumes that the city does the work, right?
Yes, because I had met with people and
I'm
said...
saying that I got a bill like that once too, and it scared the hell out of me, but it's the cost of the city doing the work. You have the right to get a private contractor.
Yeah, but I didn't feel I had anything wrong with my sidewalks. There's no trees, there's nothing...
I'm just saying that we found that the city price was significantly greater than having a private contractor do it.
It probably is. I brought a contractor down. I'll explain that. I'm going as fast as I can. So I went in front of, this is where you get your permits to work on your sidewalks. I think that's about 1 inch. This is the other side of the sign. It's also about 1 inch. And there's a giant crack right there that's 1 inch. This was the most egregious. It's right at the handicap parking spot. When you get out, you like immediately trip over a giant metal thing. There was a guy that in PBOT inside that building. He sent me to the other PBOT in North Portland, and to find out about my permits, because they didn't have information on my permits in the glass building. So I went down to North Portland. Right in front of their building was the same thing. This is the reverse of that same shot, so you don't think I was doing something goofy with the measuring stick. This is also right down the street from them. This is their driveway.
So could I speed this up a bit, because
I can start clicking through. So here's where they wanted to cut it all up.
So I'll stipulate there are many, many, many city properties in need of significant capital maintenance issues. Let's just stipulate that. So now the question from your perspective, are you saying you should not be subject to the existing ordinance, or are you saying they got it wrong, that there was nothing wrong with your sidewalk? I need to know what the basis of your
So my
objection
sidewalks weren't
is.
perfect.
Because I personally, I had to pay, my recollection was it was tens of thousands of dollars to replace a sidewalk in front of my house long before I was in elected politics. It wasn't anything I did. The tree in front of my house grew and the roots expanded and it wrecked the sidewalk. But like Commissioner Fish, I got a nasty gram and I was like, man, I bet I can get a better price and have somebody do it as required by code. So I did it, as do thousands of people around the city. So I'm just trying to understand, is it that you feel you are being targeted unfairly by the existing ordinance, or I just need to know the basis of your objection.
Yeah, I feel like I was sort of roped into what was happening up the street where there were trees and cracks. And that's not to say my sidewalks are perfect either. I don't believe that they were perfect, but I don't believe they were tripping hazards or dangerous either, which is why I brought photos. There was even chunks that were just removed that weren't even part of the sidewalk. This was like in the grass strip that was decided it needed to be removed.
That's good. And can I ask staff a question on this, or whoever is knowledgeable on this subject? And my question is this, is there an appeal process, or what typically happens? If you have somebody like this individual and he seems like a nice guy, he's saying my sidewalk's really not that bad. So I assume there are both standards, and is there an
Yeah,
appeals
absolutely. There's an
process?
appeal process. When we mail letters out, there's an FAQ sheet that goes out with that, and it has phone numbers to call. You can actually, when the original notice goes out, there's a business card from the inspector that actually did the inspections. His phone number's on there. They can contact that inspector. They can contact the office. They can set up an appointment with that inspector to go over the issues that have been posted. If there's no response, the process moves on. There was a second letter sent to Mr. Bell. No response. He didn't respond till he was marked out. When he got marked out, he did respond. He requested a final inspection. No work had been done, and the paperwork's in here. Mr. Bell came to the last assessment, but no letter was sent from Mr. Bell to halt this so we could review it, so he came into council.
Can I piggyback off the mayor's question for a sec? Very rarely do people come to council and object. We've been doing these for so long, I have a hard time remembering the last time. Does the council have the authority to pull, we have a bunch of sidewalk repairs, right, in this ordinance?
Correct.
Right. If we wanted to, could we pull this and give him a chance to do a final appeal and just pass all the others and waive whatever time limits so he could have his appeal on whatever's argument? Because I think that what the mayor is channeling, and I think his colleagues probably agreement, we don't feel like we're the sidewalk police, and the pictures and other things are helpful, but is there any reason why we couldn't just give him, notwithstanding whatever procedural problems, a chance to have his appeal and pull that from the ordinance and just move forward with everything else in the ordinance? Are we by code prevented from doing that?
His assessment was pulled the last time, so this would actually be a second time
Did he
pulling
go? Did he exercise his appeal?
He did, yes.
So he's had his appeal? Okay.
So,
And sir, I can tell you that since the mayor gave you his experience, I was roped in because a neighboring property was dinged. And in fact, the inspector walked 2-block radius around. And so my property and all my other neighbors were done. We pooled our resources together, got a contractor, got a really good price, had it done. The city has financing for people that choose to go that route where they can get, they can finance the work. But if you've already had an appeal, I don't know what basis we have to overturn that.
This is my appeal. Like, I didn't have an appeal. I had an inspector come and look at it. It hadn't been marked out. I didn't even know where it was. If you look at this picture I have right now, this is the neighboring property. I have an easement driveway, and I thought the whole time they were talking about across my easement, and I had to just explain to them that it was my easement. Because this is all this work had been done where these trees are. This is literally right next to my property running up it. So it was sort of a confusing matter until they painted it on my front street. Then it was like, oh, geez, this is all painted up. I have to have somebody come out and look at this.
We've got a full house. Mayor, I'm going to make a motion. I move that we pull this particular appeal, set it over for 30 days, ask the Bureau to take one last look at it, and then report back to us, and then proceed with the ordinance as amended.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second, and I'm not hearing from either of you that this creates a problem for the rest of the package. Is that correct?
If I could add.
Please.
We went to the appeal process in the last assessment. But
I think you're hearing the council it's not illegal, it's not improper. The council would like to move forward. We have consensus on everything else. Do you object?
Well, I wanted to finish my speech, but my talk, but we did contact Mr. Salzman's office, and the letters have all gone through, but okay, I understand.
So what I would like to see next time is, rather than just bringing this back as a package, I'd like you to have a specific presentation on this is the allegation, this is what we found, so that then we have more of an understanding of how you came to your decision.
Okay.
Great. We have a motion and a second. That is an amendment. Please call the roll on the amendment.
Fish?
And to be clear, we're taking one appeal, one issue out of the package. Carla, we're setting it back in 30 days. And we're going to be having this is a first reading of an ordinance, so we'll be voting on the underlying ordinance next week. I vote aye on the amendment.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
As I mentioned last time, I believe that those parks improvements are going to be part of a bigger improvement project. Regardless, the issue is your property and whether or not it's compliance, rather than is it unfair. I would have to say that it's one of the few times I'm happy I don't have a sidewalk anywhere near my house, because I think it is an issue that we have to grapple with citywide. Is first of all, how do we avoid burdens to property owners, and second of all, how do we provide sidewalks where there aren't any? So there's bigger questions which I appreciate you bringing up. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment's adopted. Use the time wisely. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading as adopted. Last item from this morning, item 633 was pulled, I believe, by Commissioner Fish. Is that correct?
Yes. I also have 643, the appointment was...
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry about that. Let's do 643 first, since it's on the...
643, appoint Jia-Young Michael Fu to the Portland Adjustment Committee for a term to expire June 5, 2022.
Commissioner Udaly, and I apologize, I just skipped over that inadvertently. Thank you.
Mayor. The Portland Adjustment Committee is a decision-making body that considers appeals of adjustments to development standards of the Portland Zoning Code. Adjustments are processed through a discretionary public land use review process. The public can request an appeal of the city staff decisions on adjustment applications on the grounds that a proposal does not meet one or more of the applicable approval criteria. The committee is comprised of 7 individuals from the public who are appointed by City Council. The committee members are required to have an expertise in one of 3 areas. There is currently a vacancy in the specialty of engineering, finance, construction, building management, or land development. Council will be considering today the appointment of a member of the public to this vacancy. Douglas Hardy with the Bureau of Development Services will be presenting the nomination. Welcome.
Thank you. Mayor Wheeler, council members, thank you. So Commissioner Udaly basically gave a good overview. I'll keep this under 5 minutes. Basically, as was indicated, we do have a vacancy on the Adjustment Committee, and that committee basically hears appeals of decisions that Bureau of Development Services staff have made on requests to modify standards of the zoning code, so increasing building height, setbacks, et cetera, beyond what the code allows. Basically, anybody can appeal that decision of the BDS planning staff, and that appeal goes to this particular committee. It is a committee made up of 7 volunteers from the public. We do have currently one vacancy. We did work with the Office of Neighborhood Involvement and the BDS Equity and Policy Office in recruiting candidates for this vacancy. And we recommend appointing Michael Fu. Michael is currently employed as an associate housing developer with the Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives, also known as PCRI. PCRI is one of Portland's core nonprofit affordable housing providers and developers. And Michael has worked on the financial underwriting of affordable housing development and has experience in all aspects of both the zoning code and the building code. He has undergrad degrees in mathematics and economics and a master's in economics. And with that experience, he will bring a unique perspective to the committee. And certainly our interviews with him, he is somebody who's very enthusiastic about improving the quality of life in Portland. So I thank you for your consideration on that.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions? Otherwise, I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Saltzman. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman. Aye. Udaly.
Well, thank you for being here, Mr. Hardy, and thank you to Mr. Fu. Aye.
Fritz.
Appreciate your work, fine, making sure we have diverse representation on all our committees of various interests. Thank you. Aye.
Wheeler.
Great. Well, we're lucky to have Michael Fu stepping forward. Thank you for the work you did to recruit him. I vote aye. The report's accepted. Last item from this morning, 633.
Amend contract with Infotech and Consulting, Inc. to increase the not-to-exceed amount to $1,545,000 for the implementation, support, and maintenance of a new environmental compliance information management system.
Commissioner Fish.
Mayor, my first question was, who the hell pulled this thing? And then I guess Carla clarified that I pulled it. We have a 2-hour presentation, but in the interest of time, we're going to do it in 3 minutes. This ordinance supports the Bureau of Environmental Services in implementing a new system to manage data for 4,000 commercial and industrial users. The new system will improve management of data across multiple work groups, improve data security and integrity, and improve transparency to the public by making it easier and quicker to retrieve data in response to public inquiries. Matt Kriblitz, BES Compliance Manager, is here with a very brief presentation. Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Commissioner Fish, and thank you, Council, and good morning.
Morning.
Along with me is Baron Howe, our Division Manager of Mapping Data.
We're all still laughing. I think that's great.
And Application Services. I am the Environmental Compliance Division Manager for the Bureau of Environmental Services. Our objective in my division is to protect the city's sanitary and stormwater sewer systems and local water quality through a number of programs. And we do that with industrial pretreatment and alternative discharge control programs, which are permitted programs for sanitary, industrial stormwater, maintenance inspection program for private stormwater facility inspections, outfall basin investigations, incident investigations, pollution complaint investigations, and our fats, oils, and grease program. These programs regulate many of the same customers and share data. However, the individual programs use a variety of disparate systems to manage data, including BES-developed applications, a commercial product, spreadsheets, and various paper and electronic files. We require an environmental compliance information management system to effectively and consistently track the commercial and industrial users' compliance with regulatory requirements to properly protect the city's sanitary and stormwater systems. The data management system will be used to track data for each of these regulatory programs in a single system, including information about regulated industries, requirements for inspection, monitoring, and reporting, and compliance with those requirements. The data management system will address data security, data integrity, data accessibility, and operational efficiencies. After a competitive vendor process, we selected Infotech and Consulting. We're going to run this system, we're going to develop this system in a multi-phase process. Phase 1, which we have basically completed already, is the the planning phase. That was a not to exceed value of $232,776. The second phase, to mitigate risk, to mitigate risk, and as recommended by procurement services, the contract payments are set out as firm fixed prices based on accepted deliverables, not time and materials. Procurement Services also recommended that the contract intentionally facilitate future planned amendments for implementation for each of these specific programs, and for maintenance and support of the system. So that's all covered. So phase 2 is the implementation, and that's including the system configuration and customization, data migration, interface with other systems, including our lab analysis, report development, testing, and training. And then each development planned amendment for implementation of one or more program will again be firm fixed price that is tied to a specific statement of work. The project was reviewed by BTS, and Liz Mitchell with BTS is available here as well, BTS determined that it was not subject to the technical oversight committee, and partly that's because it resolves a specific need for one division. It won't be used by other bureaus or the public. The one big external benefit to this system is that we will be able to expedite public records requests by searching from one point instead of searching multiple systems. And I can take questions, or Barron or Liz Mitchell could take any technical questions.
Colleagues? Very good. Is there any public testimony on this item?
I'm sorry, this was pulled. I didn't have a
633. No, very good. This is any final words? This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, that completes this morning's session. Good afternoon. We're all back here. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. The first item on our afternoon agenda is item number 652.
Just as a point of clarification, we've got 2 hours and 10 minutes scheduled for this afternoon. Is your intention to do all of these items?
So I have lost most of the people who are planning on testifying on items 653 and 654, which I had intended to read together. So my suspicion is the presentation will be much, much briefer than was originally anticipated. So it is my hope we get out of here in the next hour.
I'm just do it and pack at 5. I'm just wondering, the last item, the framework for the Smart City Initiative, is that something that could be moved?
Let me work on that while let's go ahead and go to the first item and let me confer with staff on that issue.
Okay.
So why don't we start with 652?
We'll keep our presentation to 30 minutes or less.
Great.
652, adopt parking management manual to establish guidelines for managing public parking in the city of Portland.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. The parking management manual we're bringing forward today establishes operational guidelines for implementing City Council adopted parking management policies found in our transportation system plan and also in the comprehensive land use plan. The manual also fulfills council direction from April 2016 ordinance that directed PBOT staff to create a plan for implementing performance-based pricing. The goal of the manual is to translate council direction into guidelines that are a starting point for staff to consistently and fairly respond to the questions received in day-to-day operations. Any new parking management districts and changes to existing enforcement hours will come back to City Council for approval prior to implementation. We greatly appreciate the work of both the consultants and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee for committing their time and energy over the last 18 months. Our consultants, Rick Williams and William Reynolds, are presenting the Stakeholder Advisory Committee recommendations for the parking management manual. And Division Manager with PBOT Parking Operations, Melissa McCready, is here to answer additional questions. So 3 of you come on up.
Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners, my name is Rick Williams with Rick Williams Consulting. It's really a pleasure to be here and to have had the opportunity to work on this. In the interest of time, my partner William Reynolds will give you a brief PowerPoint presentation that summarizes the elements of the manual itself. And then William, Melissa, and myself will be here at the end of that to answer your questions. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. My name again, William Reynolds with Rick Williams Consulting, and thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for that introduction. Just to share a little bit of background, additional background before diving into the contents of the manual. The direction to develop a performance-based process for managing parking was actually initiated more than 3 years ago as a key recommendation that emerged from the outreach process associated with developing the 2015 citywide parking strategy. So that extensive process included communication with close to 1,000 individuals and more than 50 briefings, meetings, public events throughout the city. A consistent theme that emerged was a desire to manage parking using a transparent, data-driven approach referred to as performance-based parking management. So as Commissioner Saltzman mentioned, with Resolution 37204 in April 2016, Council directed PBOT to develop this parking-based management program that formalizes its operational guidelines to implement city policy. So it's been developed over the last 18 months.
You've got a box here
William,
that's
look at
blocking your...
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Graphic.
So it's been developed over the last 18 months, and it essentially just relies on standardized guidelines, performance measures, and exception processes in order to consistently and transparently manage Portland's public parking system based on annual data collection efforts. So what you see on the slide now are the chapters, each of the key chapters within the manual, and I'll use this brief 9-slide presentation to just walk through each of these chapters, some of the key contents, and then the three of us can answer questions at the end when they arise. So each of these chapters provides clear guidelines on each of the topics referenced to serve as a resource manual, essentially to help add clarity and consistency to parking management questions that PBOT gets asked on a daily basis. Each chapter was developed specifically by the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, who we are here to represent today. And it's based on a performance-based process that uses data, as I mentioned, annual data collection efforts and best management practice to inform parking management practices citywide. So what you see here is the actual 10-member Stakeholder Advisory Committee who led the development of this parking management manual, and that includes the Pearl District Neighborhood Association, Portland Business Alliance, Venture Portland, the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine, Portlanders for Parking Reform, the Central Eastside Industrial Council, the Northwest District, GOLOI, the Portland Freight Committee, and the Downtown Neighborhood Association. Many of these organizations have provided letters of support, and several are here today. So with that, I'll go and get into each one of the individual chapters. The first chapter, Chapter 2, refers to parking management districts. And more specifically, outlines processes for going about establishing new parking management districts within commercial corridors around the city. So there's currently no guidelines for establishing parking management districts. And so the Parking Management Manual establishes clear guidelines, including an 8-step process, one of which would be establishing a work group of business representatives and district residents who would be responsible for recommending parking management strategies within that parking management district, and then monitoring performance and reviewing the annual data collection efforts within that parking management district. So the process importantly includes outreach to surrounding communities, specifically including nearby historically underserved communities of color, and any potential impacts from parking management within the commercial corridors would therefore have an opportunity to make sure they're mitigated in the surrounding neighborhoods. So once a parking management district has been established, one of the parking management strategies that may emerge at the recommendation of the district representatives would be potentially moving to on-street paid parking. So the Parking Management Manual clarifies existing city policy and establishes a series of requirements that must be met before implementing a new meter district within a parking management district. So as noted in the Parking Management Toolbox, which came before City Council in January of this year, meters should really only be used as a tool to manage demand in commercial corridors after time limits coupled with consistent enforcement are not able to achieve stated performance objectives. That is to say, demand simply exceeds the ability for the system to serve it effectively. Those who are seeking to get to their destination aren't able to find a spot quickly and easily. At that point, then meters may be considered. So overall, existing city policy was used to develop all of the guidelines within Chapter 2, and it simply helps to add additional clarity, ensuring transparency in the implementation of city policy. Chapter 3 deals with details surrounding the implementation of time limits. So one of the key recommendations of this chapter is to standardize time limits citywide using essentially 3 tiers, 15 or 30 minutes for very short-term parking needs, 2-hour parking areas, and 4-hour parking areas. And importantly, actually, these 3 tiers have already been implemented in all 5 existing meter districts around the city. And these guidelines are used to serve as a tool for future parking management districts as they emerge within commercial corridors. So for new parking management districts, another recommendation is to default to 2 hours as the first tier of time limits in the area, starting with enforcement at 10 a.m. And then adjustments to those would be based on data as needed through a performance-based process. The next chapter deals with pricing, or more specifically using data, using a data-driven approach to inform pricing adjustments within meter districts. So to implement a performance-based process, the Parking Management Manual establishes clear performance targets. That's specifically goal occupancy range of 65% to 85% during peak hours. And then it provides guidelines for how to go about adjusting rates annually if needed. It may not be needed if it falls within that range, but those adjustments would be based on annual data collection efforts. And the primary goal would really to be support economic vitality and allow visitors to quickly and easily find convenient parking even during peak hours. So at the core of this is a standardized annual review process. So tiered rate adjustments are used or established to allow for a clear, transparent, data-driven approach. Further, all proposed rate adjustments emerging from this process will come before council each year. Other cities that have implemented performance-based pricing include San Francisco, Seattle, Washington, D.C. They've all found it to be an effective method to adjust rates based on data and therefore balance demands more effectively across the system. So ultimately, the goal of a performance-based pricing adjustment system is to provide additional parking options for all users. So rate increases would be targeted in only areas with the highest demands, and this allows for rate reductions in lower demand areas, providing more opportunity for individuals to find on-street parking at a more affordable rate within each meter district. This is also coupled with the off-street system. The off-street rates will continue to provide a lower cost option. And additionally, Smart Park Garages offer a discounted monthly pass for low-income residents. So taken together, the performance-based approach, the goal is to provide a variety of parking options within each area. The next chapter is event districts, or more specifically, on-street management during events at larger venues. So there's currently no guidelines for establishing new event districts around large venues, and working with the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, we determined that large venues, in this case, would be defined as those with a capacity of 10,000 or more, which takes the list down to what you see on the screen: Providence Park, which currently does include an on-street event district, and then Rose Quarter and the Convention Center. So we worked with the Rose Quarter and Convention Center to come up with some of the guidelines in this chapter. And essentially, the Parking Management Manual establishes a process for managing on-street public parking during events, including a process for how to go about adjusting rates based on data collected during actual events at these venues. And the goal would be to encourage the use of alternative modes, reduce congestion around these venues, and minimize impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. So the Oregon Convention Center and the Rose Quarter are supportive of the guidelines we've developed. And the last key chapter I want to discuss is related to truck loading zones, on-street truck loading zones. So the goal with this chapter was to establish consistent loading zone management practices citywide. So the Parking Management Manual establishes 5 standard loading zone options, which is actually reduced from 44 different loading zone signs that you can find around the city today. And the goal of this reduced number of signs is to improve consistency and allow both freight operators and visitors to easily find available parking.
Thank you.
So we worked with the Portland Freight Committee. We met with them several times throughout this process. They support the proposed guidelines. They've provided a letter of support, and they note in their letter that they feel these guidelines will support businesses, they'll continue to support businesses with on-street delivery needs while still allowing equitable access for all users outside of those loading zone time periods. So that concludes the presentation. I just wanted to show the contents again, but please, we are here to answer questions and dive into the details. Thank you.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions? Commissioner Fritz.
I want to acknowledge right off the bat here that I've so far had 2 kind bars to eat all day, so I am somewhat cranky.
Okay.
And I'm really concerned about, this is a fairly massive policy document on parking and doesn't have the kind of public input I would expect at a hearing of this magnitude. So for various reasons, it's starting 2 hours late, maybe one of them. I'm concerned to start off with that the ordinance says that the ordinance is binding city policy. It seems to me that some of the things in the manual are new and are not existing binding city policy. So maybe I can just go through some of the concerns I have. Just from looking through it fairly briefly, in Chapter 1, the policy identifies 6 key objectives. Equity is not mentioned. And so I'm not seeing, throughout this manual, I'm not seeing attention to who benefits, who burdens, who gets to make the decisions. A lot of the decisions are being made by the people who live close by or the businesses. What about the employees? What about other visitors? What about impacts on low-income folks who may be needing to park in an area for various reasons?
Well, I think in terms of the new districts, because the existing districts are in place, in terms of the new districts, the formation of the stakeholder advisory committees that will evaluate the process of establishing a district, the intent would be to include those populations.
But that's not stated in here. So if this is binding city policy, then I should think it should be stated in here. I thought when the last time we discussed it, we were going to do some pilot projects before completely rearming the system. Is that, am I not remembering
we're doing
correctly?
the pilots for the permits, for our area parking permits. This has nothing to do with permits. This is just about establishing process so that when we get contacted by the community to come out and look at their parking problems or their perceived parking problems, we can establish a process to do data collection and to do some outreach in those areas to learn how we could manage their parking challenges. And it would be a lot of outreach behind that before we would establish anything. And if we were to bring something forward, it would come to council first before any kind of adoption would be happening for a new district. This is just for new districts.
Okay, that's helpful. For instance, on page 12, when it says establish a work group, it should specify looking at who may be particularly burdened, and it may not necessarily be the residents and business owners living nearby. For step 7, implementation, on page 13, it says once approved, PBOT will lead implementation of the recommended parking management strategies. Does that, I don't see a point where it says it comes back to council for approval.
It would.
So that
we can certainly add that.
You certainly add that.
I would
It's certainly
suggest
the intent.
that needs to be clarified.
Because of the
Sorry, I
formation
didn't
of a
hear
new
the first part
district,
of it.
council
So
would
it
need
would come back, is that correct?
Yes, because
But the steps,
Anytime we
as outlined don't
establish
say that it does.
Anytime we establish a new district, would have to come to council for approval.
because it would be a new district which council would then formally establish. Once the process is determined by the stakeholder process, their determination would come to you for approval, to establish it as a formal parking management district.
In the manual.
Yes, ma'am.
The minimum size of 80 on-street stalls, how did you get to that number?
That's a standard that's within best practices around the country. That's a place to start, certainly once the process begins. It's also an establishment, there's certain economies of scale that work for enforcement and establishment of a district that the 80 stalls begins with. But that can be expanded or contracted per the stakeholder process and determining where the data collection occurs.
Well, it can't, though. If this is binding city policy and it says it has to be at least 80, then we can't make it
To begin the
smaller.
discussion.
And it would need to be at least 80 spaces because of parking enforcement to make it an efficient management of a district. If we're going to implement parking regulation, we need to be able to enforce it.
Okay. Moving to page 43, it talks about variable meter pricing, and that this manual establishes an hourly rate ranging between $1 and $5 per hour. That's the range which would be approved by council. Then recommended that the PBOT director has the authority to make meter rate adjustments that remain within this range. So that sounds to me like the commissioner in charge of transportation gets to decide whether a meter is $1 an hour or $5 an hour. Is that correct?
That would be included in the rate. The director would put that in the rate schedule that comes to you every year.
And it would be incremental increases, and it's based on data collection.
Well, again, it doesn't say that that's approved by council. It says it's approved by the director.
It would still have to come before council for the transportation fee schedule.
I actually raised the same question last week with our check-in with Dave Benson. I think this is the same item. Yes. I'm a little reluctant to surrender the council's authority to approve new meter rates, particularly downtown. Am I speaking of the right report, or am I?
Yes, you are speaking of the right report.
Okay.
So performance-based pricing, we were directed to come up with a plan. This is the result of our stakeholder advisory committee for our plan. Other cities are doing this. This is best practice in other cities that has been effective. One of the things to keep in mind with the adjustments based on data is that not only is it possible to increase, it's also possible to decrease. So that provides better efficient use of the whole parking management system. So folks who maybe don't want to pay for the higher demand areas and would prefer to park a little farther away from their destination would have that option. And then we are pricing where the higher demand is in a manner that's effectively managing the parking.
So Commissioner Fritz, I don't want to take you off can I ask a follow-up on this issue? And thank you for highlighting it, Commissioner Saltz, and thank you for addressing it. So I want to make sure I understand what you're proposing. So if I'm hearing you correctly, just tell me if I'm wrong. I'm hearing you say that you want to have this new rate structure, that you would give the bureau director or the commissioner in charge the discretion to propose a change to that structure, but it has to come back to the city council for discussion and approval. Is that correct or not correct?
It would come back as part of the transportation fee schedule. And this is
so help me as a relative newbie here. Coming back as part of the transportation fee schedule, is that when
part of the budget? That's when all of our fees come before council as part of the budget process.
So that you cannot change it in the meanwhile. It has to come back as part of the process.
Correct. This would be an annual adjustment based on data.
Okay.
Between two goalposts that council, what we're requesting today. It would be setting the goalposts between $1 to $5 an hour with incremental increases of no more than 20 cents, 40 cents, or 60 cents annually based on the data collection.
But you could not change them at the discretion of the commissioner in charge or the bureau in between those.
No, it would be annual.
Processes.
It would only be once a year.
Got it. Okay.
And it would be as part of the whole budget process.
Well, I think that would be helpful to have that written down.
I agree. That's not how I read this, to be honest with you.
It's incredibly nuanced, which is why we're sitting here.
Okay, thank you.
So it's the range that is set annually by transportation fee schedule?
No.
Or the actual parking rates?
The increase or decrease.
Okay.
Or decrease. Keep in mind, there is most likely decrease.
Right, okay.
There is a floor, Commissioner, which is $1, because that's cost to maintain the system, so rates could go down. But the $5 is a horizon, $1 to $5. The rate increments come back, as Melissa said, as a part of data and in increments of 20, 40, or 60 cents based on some thresholds established in the manual. Once an area gets to $5, some years in the advance, then the whole rate range would come back to council to be reestablished.
Okay. So right now, any increment between that $1 and $5 does get approved in the transportation fee schedule?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And we can make that more clear.
So continuing on, again, thank you. I appreciate your forbearance. It's not clear to me how decisions are made about the event districts. It says that a threshold is at least 10,000 attendees, but not whether that's an absolute trigger or whether there's some discretion allowed in that. Currently, it's only the Timbers matches that are event priced. What would be the process for deciding whether the Thorns or a future baseball club or anybody else would be charged event pricing?
So we worked with the Rose Quarter as well as the Convention Center on that issue, and they actually come up with attendance estimates for each one of their events. They do that to adjust their own parking rates ahead of time, so they have about a 6-month calendar where they're forecasting their attendance, and then based on that forecasted attendance, you would work with the stakeholder advisory committee around that event district to determine if an on-street event rate would be warranted based on the projected attendance. So for small events and within the Rose Quarter, you would not implement on-street event rates. It would only be triggered for the larger events.
But who makes that decision?
It's the same as the performance-based pricing. So there's thresholds, there's guideposts, and there's incremental increases based on data collection of occupancy and how the system's getting used.
I think a more direct answer.
Sorry? That has to come to council.
Yes.
Because I know that's where we got tripped up last time.
Correct.
We were looking
No,
at that.
this again would have to come through in the transportation fee schedule. There wouldn't be just random adjustments. It would be an annual process. For a couple of reasons, we can't do data collection more than once a year. It's too expensive.
Okay, so obviously, Mayor, during the budget process, you're going to have to schedule a particular hearing on things like this, I would think, because people do care about where they get to park and where they don't get to park. My final question is about, or at least for now, is about the truck loading zones. Is there a, this is on page 62, is there a rule about it has to be a commercial truck, or does any truck get to park in a truck loading zone?
There is rules. There's code that dictates who can use a truck loading zone. What sort of vehicle can park in it, how long they can park in it. It's all dictated in Chapter 16.
But the challenge is, what if somebody's got a big truck and they're not necessarily delivering to a business, they may be delivering to something else or just using a truck loading zone because they happen to have a big loading truck, they own a big truck. How do you differentiate? How does the
Enforcement uses their discretion in the field.
What is the rule? If you're a truck, do you get to park in a truck loading zone?
Typically, it's a registered commercial vehicle, generally has signage on the side of the vehicle, and again, at the discretion of the enforcement personnel. So if someone came with my pickup and I wanted to park in there, I would be illegally using the zone. If I wanted to deliver something not in a loading zone, the city has a permit process where I could actually, quote unquote, bag a stall and use it for unloading for those purposes.
Well, I understand that the Parks Bureau has had hundreds of dollars of tickets for using the loading zone by Director Park, for example. Even though they've got trucks, they're using it for a purpose. So and then that comes into conflict with others who may be wanting to load and unload in those zones and not being clear as who's allowed to, who's going to get a ticket. So I would suggest that this needs more clarification, even though I appreciate it going from 44 to 4 zones. It needs to be clear as to what the purposes are, not just whether it's a truck or not.
Okay, so this is not addressing that in this manual. This is just to reduce the number of signs that we have. It's not talking about how the zones are used. That is all, again, that would be a code review, Title 16.
It doesn't deal with the rules against which a citation is issued.
This is just to reduce the number of signs for a more efficient management of the system. And the Freight Committee, we met with them 3 times, and they're highly supportive of this approach. It was mostly just to manage the system. This isn't about policy.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? Public testimony?
Yes, we have 5 people signed up. The first 3, please come on up, are Tony Jordan, Terry Parker, and Rick Michelson.
2 minutes, please. Name for the record. And colleagues, I am going to set over item 655. That is the establishing a priorities framework for the City of Portland Smart City PDX initiative. This is a resolution There is no way we are going to get to it today, so I'd like to move it to Thursday, June 21st at 3:30 p.m.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for hearing my testimony, and I hope I can thank you later, so I'm going to move this up, for approving this critical policy on my 40th birthday. I also, I've been here for like several hours. I might go a little over time. I hope that's okay.
Birthday present, but please do state your name for the
My
record.
name is Tony Jordan, and I'm the founder of Portlanders for Parking Reform, and I've served on as a volunteer on 4 stakeholder parking committees in the last 4 years, including the committee that produced this manual. Access, equity, safety, sustainability, affordability, these are all critical issues that parking policy has an impact on, and it's important that we look holistically at our transportation and housing network when we think about parking and transportation. Is access to downtown and our commercial corridors equitable, safe, and affordable to all Portlanders now? Is the status quo sustainable as it is? Can we keep things the way they are and meet critical environmental and sustainability goals? And I don't think so. Cheap and free parking leads to congested curbs with little turnover, and people, poor, rich, or in between, waste valuable time circling for parking, often to eventually give up and park further away, paying the same price to park in what you might call a cruddo spot out by the freeway, or someone's paying to park in a primo spot right in front of the restaurant where everyone wants to be. Time is money, and often time is worth more to people with less money and less leisure time than to office workers with flexible schedules. Performance parking management uses pricing not as a tax, but as a way to allow people to make their own educated choices about how they value their time and their money. And people do care about where they get to park, and that's important. With properly managed parking, the parent with grumpy kids can find a convenient spot and complete an errand quickly. That might be worth an extra 50 cents or $1. With performance parking, people with disabilities will have a greater likelihood of finding a space near their destination. When people can find parking, they make fewer turns, which makes our streets safer. They drive fewer miles, which makes our air cleaner. And with properly priced parking, more people will take other modes, which makes our city work better. This policy isn't something we made up. My mentor, Professor Donald Shoup, presented these ideas in his 2000 book, The High Cost of Free Parking. San Francisco and other cities have implemented them starting in 2011, and Portland's been discussing and debating this for 3.5 years. I've been to pretty much all of the parking meetings that have happened in this city, and I know people don't want to pay more for parking. But in all those meetings, I've yet to hear a better solution to the lack of access, the pollution and danger that parking congestion cause than performance pricing. We can't afford to spend millions and millions to build massive public garages, and if we could, it would be an ecological and traffic disaster. We can't add on-street parking, and our policies are leading to removing on-street parking for bike racks, transit lanes, and drop zones. So really, from what I can tell, the options are to adopt these best practices we have or to do nothing and let people not have access to downtown. And I suggest we do something. Thank you.
Very well said, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
It's a heck of a way to spend your birthday.
It's a labor of love.
Thank you for being here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Rick Michelson, and I'm the chair of the Northwest Parking SAC and also a member of this SAC that worked on this project here. I think we need to look at this as an incremental step. It's really the first time that these policies and things have been put down on paper in a way that people can understand them, and that's a great step forward. I believe, however, that probably in the next year or two, perhaps when the next rate increase comes through, you're really going to be wanting to look at some of these and change them and adjust them. So I support their adoption today with the understanding that it's a step down the road. We've been working on making changes in Northwest Parking for years, and it's a very slow process. But if you don't take the first step, you never get any farther beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question?
Commissioner Fritz.
I support what you just said, and it's what the first part of this ordinance says that they're implementing the guidelines compared in the manual, but then it says it's binding city policy. Isn't it going to be more difficult to make those adjustments if everything in it has to come back by ordinance? No changes to anything in it?
Well, I have to admit that I'm happy that Northwest is exempt from these guidelines because we have another policy going on. But I think, how to say this? I think it's easier to respond and make changes to something, to guidelines that are down and adopted than it is to continue the way we are that has nothing adopted. And I think this puts us in a framework of how rates are going to be determined, what the timing of those rate changes is going to be, and how we approach council and who we approach in order to make those changes along the course of time. I'm not sure that really answers your question, but it's all pretty new.
Yeah, so making everything in it set in stone seems premature, perhaps.
I think if we were not going to come back and look at these for 10 years, it would be premature to be adopting it today. But since these are going to continue to be worked on, I think it's better to take this step and not delay it for another year. As Tony says, we've been trying to get to this piece of this project for 3.5 years now.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we shouldn't adopt it. I'm just saying that perhaps we should remove the clause that says it's all binding city policy to allow some adjustments as we go along.
Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Terry Parker, Northeast Portland. I'll try to summarize some of this because I wrote it for 3 minutes. Equity is totally missing when a developer can purchase a property in or adjacent to a lower density neighborhood and construct a large apartment complex, which in turn creates a parking deficiency on nearby streets. The crux of this inequity is created by city policy that allows housing to be constructed without minimum off-street parking requirements. The developer makes a profit while the rest of the neighborhood takes a hit, with the negative impact of having the streets full of cars and or the residents are required to purchase parking permits, thereby subsidizing the profits of the developer. When this happens, the developer actually ought to be should be paying for those parking permits for the residents in perpetuity. When you have streets that are full of cars, there's safety issues for emergency vehicles, garbage trucks, bicycles. There are visibility issues. There's access issues with service and delivery vehicles, and even access for mobility impaired people to access things like the TriMet lift. People that use an alternative means of transport also have cars. A similar statement is continually vocalized by bicyclists as an excuse for not paying their own way for the privilege of having specialized bicycle infrastructure. The city's own study suggests 72% of households have cars. Is the absence of on-site parking an attempt to dictate to renters they should not have a car? 59% of low-income people drive to their place of employment. Is the elimination of off-street parking with affordable housing a form of income discrimination? Having to pay to park on the street in front of your own house so a developer down the street can make a profit is totally unjust. In that motorists already pay a variety of taxes that fund the streets curb to curb, establishing curb space as an additional pay-to-use commodity is a form of discrimination. This is especially true when curb space is taken up by bike lanes with no charges or user fees assessed on bicycling. I believe that you need to require off-street parking for new development. I've listed how it should be. My neighborhood agrees with that. Rose City Park does. Choice in housing, we offer choice. We talk about choice in housing, but we want to dictate transportation mode. And I want to say that drivers are the most underserved community on any city committees, even more so than communities of color and whatnot. Drivers just are not on transportation committees. And I know I talked to you about that when you first became mayor on a one-to-one, and it still isn't happening.
Very good. Someday when I'm the transportation commissioner, I'll look forward to working with you, Terry. Thank you for your testimony, and happy birthday.
Thank you, thank you. I hope so.
All right, next, was it two more?
Two more.
Very good.
Reza Farhoudi and Stephen Liam.
All right, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Reza Farhoudi. I am also on the Stakeholder Advisory Committee that guided the development of this manual and representing the Pearl District Neighborhood Association. And on behalf of the PDNA, Planning and Transportation Committee, I urge you to adopt the manual that's before you today. The idea to study performance-based parking was formed from a recommendation of the Downtown Meter Rate Adjustment Subcommittee way back in 2015. I was also on that committee, and the idea, it's an intuitive concept, really. Set the pricing to ensure optimal utilization of the on-street supply, and studies have shown that to be 85%. So what does that get you? There's two things. One, it reduces the need to circle around the block, encourages the use of our off-street garages, and that reduces congestion, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, it makes for a more safe and livable neighborhood, and also increases turnover. It helps the economic vitality of our businesses, so that's also really important. Another thing that this manual will do is that it will codify the net meter revenue allocation policy that's used in Northwest Portland today. It allows meter revenues to be used for the benefit of the area in which it is generated. So you can use it to pay for transportation demand management programs, such as the Transportation Wallet, and pay for needed projects to improve multimodal access and safety. The problem with this right now is that this manual will not apply, this policy will not apply to the downtown meter district, which includes the Pearl, and also downtown, Old Town, South Waterfront, Goose Hollow. We have thousands of residents and employees in these neighborhoods, a lot of low-income residents as well. And we really think that we need to have some access to this to meet our own priorities. So we thank PBOT for listening to our concerns and issuing a memo to staff to review this policy in TRN 3.102. And we know it's a long process, but it's kind of always is like this with parking committees. It's kind of the circle of life. We had the Central City 2035 committee, then the downtown meter rate subcommittee, and then finally this committee. So we look forward to working with the city to meet the transportation needs of the Pearl District without making a major impact to the PBOT General Fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor. My name is Stephen Lynn. I'm the owner of Under You for Men retail stores. We're located at Southwest Park in Washington. The store is the largest men's underwear store in North America, and it takes up a quarter city block. I also represent a few of the businesses in the West End, and I'd like to say that overall, anecdotally, with conversations with those West End businesses, we actually support performance-based data parking structure. I can tell you from my own business, once Sunday parking went into place, my business increased. We are seeing better turns, and we actually would like to see parking times for Sunday morning before 1 o'clock even added. Sunday is our second busiest retail day now. Not number 5 or 6 like it used to be years ago. It's now number 2. These are important changes that have taken place, and it's data performance on parking that will make a difference for us. 40% of my current customers come in by car. I'm one of many businesses that also offer Smart Park vouchers to my customers with a $25 purchase. We also support our employees so they don't drive down with mass transit subsidies and that. So parking is still an important aspect of what we do every single day. Database is great. This data-driven pricing is an excellent model, but it also misses future. And how does this process handle future needs? And I'm going to bring one to your attention that's very important to me right now and to many of the other big businesses that support, that are getting, that need to be able to be supported when we're going up against likes of, for instance, Amazon. That's in-store shopping on the web, but in-store pickup. That particular business model is becoming more and more prolific across the city. I'm going to give you the example of Nordstrom's right now today has in-store pickup, and they pick up, the customer picks up on Southwest Park, double parking almost 5-6 times a day. I'm just seeing it all the time. They have added over 1,000 square feet of in-store pickup on that Southwest Park entranceway with no short-term quick parking ability. My store is the same, with dozens of in-store pickups because they shop on the web, pick up in-store is the comfortable, easy way. That's how you support small business. That's how you support a structure of businesses being able to go up against the big internet commerce businesses. I'd like to see some areas like this. I'd also like to see a little bit more of an outreach to the small business in my neighborhood, the West End. Literally none of us knew that this process was going on. We would like to be inclusive. We're not part of the stakeholders committees. Most of us are not members of those big organizations, which are larger developers than that. There needs to be some outreach to those of us in small business.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And that's really interesting testimony.
Yeah.
I learned 2 things I did know. Number one, the Sunday becoming the second most vibrant day for shopping. And I'm going to ask around because that's interesting to me. And the second thing, this discussion about the change in the business model from buying online but picking up in person. That's good feedback.
I have another long list. I'll be emailing it in.
Great, excellent.
I learned we have the
you.
largest men's underwear business in the country. That's
I didn't know that either.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Free advertising, everybody, free advertising. Good, so that concludes our public testimony. Anything else before I move this one along to second reading? Commissioner
I
Fritz.
would like to meet with you over the next week, Commissioner Saltzman, to discuss both whether it's binding city policy and then to clarify both some of the equity requirements and also what comes to council and what doesn't, or when it comes to council, if that be acceptable to you.
Yes.
So that there may be some amendments next week.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good testimony, good presentation. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Last but not least, items 653 and 654.
653, authorize the purchase of certain real property located at 10506 East Burnside Street at a price not to exceed $14,400,000 for affordable housing. 654, authorize a temporary interfund loan of $48 million between the Development Services Fund and the Housing Capital Fund to provide interim financing for multiple anticipated affordable housing property purchases.
All right, colleagues, let me read through my talking points, and I can probably cover most of the presentation here. I'm sorry that this happened so late that we lost, I think, most all of our presenters, but we still have some very strong folks here waiting in the dugout. The housing bond, as you all know, promised 1,300 units of permanently affordable housing that would be created at a variety of income levels within 5 to 7 years of passage. We're on track to accomplish that. In the first year and a half, we have nearly half of the promised units in process in both new developments and acquisitions of existing buildings to both provide new housing opportunities as well as preventing displacement. With the addition of this acquisition, the Portland Housing Bureau now has 3 bond projects identified, another 3 under contract, that means either in due diligence or preparing to close, and 2 prospects. Progress to date includes 314 total units, 270 net added, the remainder, of course, being permanently protected, 199 family size units, and that does not include 44 Ellington units, 96 units at 30% AMI, 29 supportive housing units, and 68 project-based vouchers. The Housing Bureau is very excited, as am I, to bring this resolution before the council, signifying an important step forward in the housing bond. The acquisition of this 51-unit building will provide affordable housing to individuals and formerly homeless families, over 160 people in total, in an area highly vulnerable to gentrification and displacement. The property's location in the Hazelwood neighborhood in David Douglas High School District in East Portland is home to the city's most diverse populations, with communities of color and foreign-born households representing half of all residents. The building includes 8 studio, 21 bedroom, and 24 two-bedroom apartments. After purchase, 1 studio apartment is going to be converted to a community space for supportive housing services and resident service activities. 16 project-based housing choice vouchers, Section 8, will be available from Home Forward for households earning between 0 and 30% of area median income, and 9 units will be reserved as supportive housing for families. The remaining units will provide housing for households earning between 31 and 60% AMI. Home Forward will provide asset management services for the property under the intergovernmental agreement, which has already been approved by the council. That was approved on February 28th. Upon transfer of the property, income qualified tenants will begin moving in immediately, including at least 9 family households currently experiencing homelessness. The Portland Housing Bureau's tenanting strategy focuses on utilizing the region's homeless family system of care to provide referrals to the 16 units for households earning between 0 and 30% AMI. In coordination with the Joint Office of Homeless Services and Home Forward, JOIN will be contracted to provide on-site services to 9 supportive housing units for formerly homeless families. Resident services will also be available for all tenants of these newly created units through a partnership agreement with a local nonprofit experienced in providing eviction prevention, resource referrals, and youth activities. Last paragraph. More progress is on the horizon for the housing bond. The demolition of the former Safari Club is complete, making way for the pre-development work of designing the future building for 3000 Southeast Powell Boulevard that includes at least 200 units of affordable housing. Staff is also hard at work assessing 3 or 4 additional projects currently under contract and finalizing policies for tenant screening criteria, incomes rising in place, and over-income residents of existing building acquisitions. With that, I will turn it over to Director Callahan. Are you first up today?
I am, and
fabulous.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you said quite a bit.
I sure did. It felt like I said quite a bit.
Thank you very much. And I know with the lateness of the hour, I'll just touch on a few highlights before I turn it over to Frida Christopher and to Susan Emmons, who are the 2 stalwart panelists who have remained with us this evening. Frida, having served on the stakeholder advisory group to create the policy framework, and Susan now working on the bond oversight committee with us. We had the opportunity to buy this building that we're able to lease up rather quickly. It's been a very fast process for us. I'm going to just skip. But within 6 months of hearing of this property, we're now bringing it to you for your approval. It is a high-quality building with durable finishes. These are apartments that are spacious and large with light and airy rooms. And quite frankly, as we look to prioritize homeless families coming in, one of the greatest assets, I think, is a washer and dryer. I can't think of anything of more benefit to kiddos than having clean clothes after they've lived in shelters or in cars or in other places. So that's not my formal talking points, but that for me is what excites me about this building.
Does each apartment have a washer and dryer?
Each apartment has a washer and dryer. So, and they're, as I said, very spacious units. I hope you'll all join us for a grand opening that we're planning on having next month so you can see it for yourself. Before I do turn it over, I would like to thank a couple of key staff members. We have worked tirelessly at the Bureau to make sure that these pipeline projects are happening. And I'd like to acknowledge Javier Mena, Carl Dinkelspiel, Tanya Wolfsberger, Bobby Daniels, Kathy Romero, Emily Benoit, and Jennifer Chang, especially for all of their efforts. With that, in the lateness of the day, I'm going to leave you with a final, I apologize for the shortness of my presentation, but I'll leave you with some final pictures.
Don't apologize.
To look at. And with that, Frida.
Oh, go first. Okay. Mayor and Commissioners, thank you for having me here today. My name is Frida Christopher, and I'm Vice Chair of the David Douglas School Board and Co-Chair of EPAP Housing Subcommittee. And as Shannon said, I was also on the Housing Bond Stakeholder Group. Just to refresh some of the things about East Portland, as the Mayor said, it's a very diverse community. In David Douglas School District, we have about 75 languages spoken in our schools. East Portland also has the largest concentration of immigrant and refugee population, which often means larger families. East Portland also has a large population of low-income working families that are often facing large increases in their rent when they're already rent burdened, and they are facing no-cause evictions. About 5 years ago, studies indicated East Portland would not be facing gentrification or displacement for significant years. Unfortunately, that's not been the case. East Portland is now in the secondary stages of gentrification, and we are seeing displacement happening. David Douglas alone has lost over 400 students in the last 3 years, which is an indicator of displacement. Although East Portland is still the most affordable area in Portland, it no longer is affordable for many of our families. Again, this year, David Douglas has over 400 students that have been identified as homeless. The East Portland community has long advocated for greater investment of tax dollars in the area, both in new buildings and displacement prevention efforts. Unlike many areas in Portland, We do not advocate not in our neighborhood. In fact, on Monday, the EPAP Housing Subcommittee has selected one of its strategic priorities for the next 2 years is to advocate for more bond dollars and other funds to be spent on land banking and affordable housing in East Portland. Many of our community members are part of vulnerable populations, and EPAP would like them to remain in our community. We are pleased to see this first new building under the bond in East Portland, especially one with strong focus on stabilizing children and families. David Douglas sees the importance of stabilizing our families so students can be more successful and have greater chance of graduating on time. The homeless family system is already working with many of our families in East Portland, and this project will go further to stabilize family. Just speaking with our superintendent this morning, they're popping up with ideas, and since this one will be opening prior to school starting, they're looking at have school registration right on site to help those families rather than having to get to the schools to register. I strongly encourage you to approve the bond funds for the purchase of the building, which is a step forward in stabilizing housing for some of our community members. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Susan Emmons, and I'm a member of the Bond Oversight Committee, and it was established early on that as they had Property Review Committee, there would be 2 members of the Bond Oversight Committee at each one of these meetings where they decided to go ahead and look at a property seriously to make an offer or not. And I was at the committee meeting when they first looked at this property. And what excited me about this property was that it's a new building. It's uninhabited. The staff at PHDB did an excellent job of presenting us information ahead of time so we could really look at did it meet the goals and the criteria of the stakeholder group, which it did very well, very completely. Location, but since it's a new building, there are no tenants, no displacement, and I was thrilled about that. We were very excited about the larger units for families, and as Shannon said, when I heard about the washer and dryer, wow. And I've imagined what it will be like for the families who are going to come to this building. I mean, some of them will come from homeless shelters. Some of them will come from transitional housing. I know that when people first see their unit, they're going to cry when they see the private bathroom. I experienced that with people. There's going to be stability for the families and children. The office on site, there's going to be the ability for these agencies that serve homeless families to have an office to meet with the people that they're supporting. That's very key, that there will be an office on site. It's a great neighborhood. It's needed in this neighborhood. It's on mass transit. There will be people living in the building who won't have cars and will utilize the mass transit. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I also would like to applaud, I think, the members of the Oversight Committee, very knowledgeable. I've been very impressed and a little intimidated by the other 4 members and how much knowledge they have and information about development. And there hasn't been a question that they've asked that the staff hasn't answered, and been very responsible about getting the information to us and been very thorough in being very prudent about what we're going to look at and buy. And then finally, to hear from the staff who looked at the building ahead of time and told us how well made it was and how it's going to last for years. Beautifully constructed, spacious, beautiful lighting. And just finally, my experience in this field has been that architecture will transform people and change their lives. And it's wonderful to think that for some of the poorest people in our community, we're going to give them beauty in their lives, and that it will be solid and a place to start from and put down roots, and their family gets to stay, not move in schools. So I'm thrilled by the building. I hope you support allocating the bond funds to purchase it.
Very good, thank you. Is there public testimony on this item, Carla?
Yes, one person, Lightning Super Creativity Watchdog.
Lightning, you're up.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Creativity Watchdog.
I think this is an impressive buy. I think I like the new building. I like the fact it's just recently been developed. I like the fact jobs have been created, materials have been bought in the local communities. Those are one of the things that I tried to emphasize on the overall bond. Create jobs, buy materials in the local community, provide housing, expand the property tax base, which goes back into the general fund, which can also go back to other issues pertaining to housing. Now, one of the questions I have on this, I like the fact, I didn't see the square footage ratio on here, but I understand they're larger square footage, so I do like that. The issue that I have, I like your price per unit. I think you're right in the range that it should be. One of the factors I wanted to try to figure out here is that when we're creating property tax expansion by these type of buildings when they're being developed, how are we going to be funding these supportive housing type units? Have we created that ongoing revenue stream? And can we create that income stream by when we're developing new units, we automatically know a certain amount will go into the general fund, and we declare that it'll go toward the supportive housing units. And that's what I wanted to have an understanding, and that's why I've stated I prefer to develop new, such as this, and up to ADA standards is my biggest concern. A lot of other issues, but this is a nice quality building. It's a great buy. It's what the bond should be used for. So I'm at total agreement on this. And again, I'm just looking at expansion of the property tax base and an ongoing revenue stream for the supportive housing units in these properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Perfectly timed. Very good. So colleagues, we have one ordinance and one resolution here. Is there any further question before we vote on the ordinance? Very good. Please call the roll.
Saltzman.
Well, this is an outstanding purchase. And where'd Susan Emmons go? Is she still there? Oh, there you are. Okay. I think you're very knowledgeable, and I think you hold your own, I'm sure, with the rest of the members of the Oversight Committee. But yeah, this is a great purchase. I want to thank Director Callahan and her staff for bringing this forward to us, and the support of the Bond Oversight Committee. This really is giving people brand new housing. Is just, you can't calculate, I think, as Susan said, the impact that it has on people. And these look beautiful from the photographs we saw, and it's a great location, very transit friendly, in a good school district, so it's really a win-win-win-win-win. So please support it. Aye.
Udaley.
Well, thank you, Director Callahan, and thank you, Frida and Susan, for sticking it out with us. It's been a especially long day. I'm very pleased to vote aye.
Fritz.
Congratulations, Director Callahan, and everybody involved. Thank you, Susan, for your service on the committee. Thanks, Frida Christopher, for being here and staying as well. I couldn't help but reflect that your position now is quite different from what it was maybe 5 years ago, and I appreciate your leadership in showing that we can think holistically and do things that benefit all of us. I have to say that my washer and dryer are still my favorite appliances, and I'm very grateful to them every single week. Aye.
Wheeler.
I could do without my washer and dryer.
No, you can.
I have lots of things I want to say, but I guess I'll just brief and to the point. First of all, I want to thank everybody who was involved in this process. I think you did an outstanding job, and I think we as a council and we as concerned citizens in this community who care about housing affordability, we need to start talking about it differently. And Director Callahan and I have had this conversation. I was thinking as I was reading the latest article on our affordable housing not being affordable and realizing how we are missing an opportunity with our public to explain more clearly what it is they have asked us to do, first of all, and second of all, talking about how what we are doing is directly aligned with what they have asked us to do. And since this is an affordable housing plan, I'm just going to take a moment to take the opportunity to address a couple of these things. Every time we buy a building, or every time we build a building, somebody is going to take the ratio of the cost of the building to the number of front doors on the units. And they're going to say, the cost is X per unit. And then they're going to go find somebody in Portland and say, these guys paid $280,000 per door. What could you have built it for? And they'll think about a lot that they purchased somewhere outside of the I-205 corridor, and they'll think about some studio and one-bedroom apartments they built, and they'll come up with a number that's, let's say, half. And people will say, see, these guys at City Hall, they don't get it. They don't understand how to build affordable housing. And so we need to stop talking about the number of units, because it ultimately becomes an apples to oranges comparison, and it's confusing. We need to talk about the number of people. A studio apartment in an SRO building outside of I-205 is not the same thing as a building inside the corridor that has larger family size units and also meets our requirements around 0 to 30 and permanent supportive housing. They are not the same thing. And we need to talk about outcomes, not the dollars per door. And so that's going to require us, I think, to be more aggressive. I also heard an interesting criticism this week earlier. I think, in fact, I was being described as stupid, because, which, you know, may not be far from the truth. I don't know. But let me run this one by you. They say, why on earth are you buying buildings that already have tenants in them? Because you're not adding to the housing stock. That is factually true, except for a really important aspect, which is we are permanently protecting the affordability of that housing stock. So in some cases, it's not about creating additional housing stock. It's about making sure that people of all income ranges and all walks of life can continue to live in this city. For example, where do you think the people who are working in our vibrant restaurant culture are living? What about the people in our vibrant arts and culture community? Where are they living? What about the people who make that amazing beer that we all celebrate? Where do you think they are living? And I'll tell you this, if they cannot afford to live in this city, we lose a lot of what makes this city worth living in for all of us. So protecting housing at affordable rates for the long run is really important. Now, last but not least, I'm throwing this in for Jennifer Cooperman, because she's sitting here, fellow former Treasury nerd. Life cycle costs matters to me. We could go out and buy a bunch of tough sheds and throw them on a street corner and say, look, we're building housing at $500 per unit, and take the first prize for being the cheapos of the year. But we're going to have to replace those, and they're not going to have the same amenities. And if you're looking at a 100-year life cycle, sometimes investing more upfront in quality materials and quality construction and thinking about things like energy efficiency, those things actually save you money over the long term in terms of life cycle costs. And anybody who owns or manages real estate for a living, they all know this stuff. But we've done a lousy job. And I take personal responsibility for this in explaining these principles to the public. I think if I and we could do a better job of talking about how we are in fact being very good fiscal stewards of the dollars they entrusted us to, I think they would read and listen and hear criticisms with maybe a little more skepticism, or maybe have a few follow-up questions. So that's sort of my hope. I went on a lot longer than I wanted to do on that. Anyway, I vote aye. Thank you, everybody. The ordinance is adopted. Jennifer, before we get to, is there anything you wanted to add before we talked about the resolution? Good. Call the roll.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
So this authorizes the interfund loan. Thank you very much, Jennifer Cooperman, from the City Financial Officer and the Housing Bureau. And Development Services Fund. This is a good way to finance this amazing project. Aye.
Wheeler.
I vote aye. The resolution is adopted, and believe it or not, we are adjourned.